You're on the mic with JD, an extraordinary show for ordinary people. Let's go. What's up, good people? It's your boy JD. Hey, I got another very special guest here with me today. This is my boy Mike Baldwin. Mike, what's up?
Hey, what's going on? What's going on, brother? How's everything going?
Oh, man, it's great, man. It's been a long time, man. Well, we known each other about, 20 years plus?
Oh, yeah, long time. From when I was a baby in this thing we called the Army.
Yeah. I remember Private Baldwin. I think you was a fueler back in the day, right?
Absolutely. 92 Fox.
Yeah. Always grinding, always staying hungry, always humble. You know, you're my Florida State brother, too. Go Noles.
Oh, yeah, go Noles.
You know, so we have these things in common. You know, we have the Army career in common. We're from the same area in Florida. You know, we have a lot of the same, thought processes on how we do this thing. And I thought it was interesting, the subject that you brought to me and the topic you want to talk about. And we kind of dubbed it success through failure. Like, what does that mean?
Absolutely. So bottom line up front, I think as leaders, we tend to forget from time to time that, hey, failure is a part of growth, right? I like to kind of associate it with growing through failure or growing through experience, right? And we gain those key experiences through failing, all right? It's like I always say, I've had great leaders, and luckily some of those leaders have allowed me to grow through that failure. So again, I think it's key for us as senior leaders to understand, like, hey, it is okay to fail, right? It is okay to fail because with that failure on the back end will come some growth. And I guarantee you, we won't make that same failure again. So, that's what I sum it up to.
Yeah, no, that's powerful stuff. And for our listeners out there who may not know who Mike Baldwin is, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right, I appreciate it. So, first and foremost, I got to start by absolutely thanking you for allowing me, to come on this platform. I truly believe that as leaders, we must always ensure that we are relevant, and we are passing the Army's message down to our subordinates, right? Ensuring that we get into the lowest level, right? And in this day and age, hey, this is absolutely one of the ways to get after that task, right? i.e. podcast, social media, so on and so forth. So first off, again, I really appreciate this opportunity.
Well, I appreciate you, brother. You're always welcome here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So just a little bit something about me. As always, of course, I'm born and raised in the mighty Pensacola, Florida. I am a Florida State fan.
Let's go.
I am married. I have 3 beautiful children. I've been married for about 17 years now, and my wife been with me throughout this entire journey, and I cannot do anything without her. So I attributed all of my successes to, the support of my wife, i.e. my backbone. So as you previously mentioned, I was previously a 92 Fox. I am now a 88 Zulu by way of 88 Mike. I've been in the Army roughly about 19 years now. I will hit 20 years this August. I am currently a student at the Sergeant's Major Academy, class 73, Motivate and Serve. Right. So some of my past experiences. I started out my career at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. I would like to say, the majority of my career there. I went from Fort Campbell to Hood, back to Campbell, Knox, back to Campbell. Then after that, I was selected to serve as a drill sergeant. I was stationed in Fort Sill. I did about 4 years there at Fort Sill. Did some drill sergeant time. I served as a platoon sergeant in an FSC. And then I had one of those very influential leaders that saw something in me, and he actually selected me to serve as the operations sergeant major within the MLRS battalion, in which I then got selected for master sergeant. Then I went out to JBLM. I did some time as a first sergeant there in an FSC, as well as a Bravo company, BSB, a brigade maintenance company. Then after that, I actually got selected to serve as a senior talent management NCO for CMF 88, which I was stationed out at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I got to actually get a good understanding of how the Army is staffed and manned, in which I think is absolutely a great opportunity for anybody that is aspiring to, become a sergeant major or a command sergeant major. Again, that's a little bit something about me, and I would not be here, once again, without my wife, as well as those influential leaders that, again, saw something in me, but also noted that success is gained through failure, which is, I think, is a great point and a great topic for us to speak on today.
Yeah, no, and we know a lot of the same people, and, you've always stood out even to other great leaders that we know as, somebody who's, tested and trial by fire, right? And proven to be successful, and proven to be humble, and proven, to be one of those guys who is ultimately selected for the top positions in the Army. So congratulations to you. And I appreciate you for taking the time as a student in the Sergeant's Major Academy. I mean, I can appreciate time is valuable over there. I'm sure you're about 3 or 4 papers deep in any one time. So I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. And again, I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. So let's talk about success through failures. And I mean, why do you think soldiers are afraid to fail?
First off, that's a good question, right? And I like to take a step back and look at me, and I like to put myself in those, different situations and kind of answer this question. So first, I start with this. The Army is a results-driven organization. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of the times you are graded, as I like to say, based off of the results that you produce, right? And sadly, that is associated with failure, right? Or success, all right? But the sad part is that we as leaders tend to always say, with failure comes a negativity vibe, right? So, hey, if you fail, that is a negative thing. If you fail, you are not producing the results warranted to call you a good leader, a good soldier, right? And, of course, as always, mission dictates, time dictates, right? But I think that's not always the fact, and I think it's not always true. So just to kind of tie it up and bring it back in, I believe that soldiers are afraid to fail because they believe that if they fail, they would not be viewed upon as a great leader or a great soldier because of that negative vibe that comes with the term failure.
Well, the Army slogan right now is winning matters. Right. So, absolutely. And everything that we do in the Army is a competition, right? To win. And, it's very alpha driven as far as personality types are concerned. So I think a lot of people think failure is definitely not an option. But I have seen in the past where people actually cut corners and shortcut the process in order to be successful and meet some time hack and things like that, which is ultimately pretty dangerous because, we always say we train as we fight. So if you're training and you're shortcutting, the way that you practice, the way that you train, ultimately when you get into the fight, that's all right? You're going to take a shortcut.
Absolutely.
And there's no way to respawn, right? If something happens, and somebody, his life is taken based off, somebody not willing to fail in training in order to win, and not necessarily really, going through the traps of failure in order to grow as a team, is definitely detrimental.
So I completely agree. And I think it goes back to the old term, simple term, practice makes perfect, right? And what we don't want is a soldier to experience something for the first time when it truly matters and failure is absolutely not an option, i.e. in combat or a real world mission, so on and so forth. And I think it kind of ties in to what you're saying, right? So that's why, again, I think it's key for us to promote that organization with a learning culture, right? Promote that organization to let soldiers know that, hey, this is the time to fail. This is when you fail. You fail through those training exercises. You are failing when, the mission, the outcome of the mission does not determine life or death, right? And again, I think that's key because you are absolutely correct. Time and time again, you see leaders cutting corners and doing this and doing that to say that, hey, I am the best at this, or I am number one at this, or so on and so forth. And they really don't gain that experience through actually going through the situation the proper way and learning from those shortcomings, right? And then when the outcome of the operation actually does matter, right, they really don't know, how to actually get through it successfully because they've been cutting corners just to say, hey, my squad, my team, or my company, or so on and so forth, got it done first. We're the best, when that is actually not the case, right? So again, I think an easy way to sum it up is practice makes perfect, and go through those failures when it doesn't matter, right? So that when it do matter, you absolutely know how to, execute and react to different situations.
Yeah, I had a commander who refused to lie on his unit status reporting because he wanted the Army to know that his pacing items were broke, right? Because, saying that you're 4 of 4 or 6 of 6, of these pacing items, saying you're ready for combat. You're ready to go and fight and win our nation's wars. And he refused to lie. He would rather, subordinate, well, not his subordinate, but his higher commanders, being upset with him and showing, what his true status was of his combat power. For one, the former commander lied about it for years, and they never actually got the money to fix what they needed to fix because they said they were good. So it took us 2 years to get those pacing items back up and running because he refused to lie, and he eventually got the funding to fix everything and actually really report that he was 4 of 4, 6 of 6 pacing items and really, really ready for war because he refused to take a shortcut. He would rather fail up front and be honest with his reporting and the unit status for combat power versus lie and then be subject to be relieved when he can't perform as a unit as he reported. So yeah, I mean, what you're saying is super, super powerful and it's spot on because, what we stated earlier, like there's no do-overs, right? So you're not going to get the support that you need if you're not willing to fail when it really, I don't want to say doesn't matter, but, when lives aren't at stake. So. Absolutely.
And I would tell you this also, I commend that commander, right? Because as a leader, trust me, I completely acknowledge the fact that, this is an extremely difficult concept to grasp. And I'm going to kind of add some context to that why, right? Because, as leaders, how are we typically graded? Especially for non-commissioned officers of the rank of staff sergeant and above now. We are ranked, right? We are constrained to that top 24%, and we are ranked amongst our peers, right? And what are some of the easiest ranking guidelines? Training stats, equipment stats, ACFT stats, some of the simple things, right? And it goes back to those cutting corners, right? And it goes back to something that you highlighted about one of your previous commanders of being honest, right? Because when your number is called, what you don't want to do is say, oh, well, I wasn't honest. I was just trying to butter up my stats so that I can look good amongst my peers. Right, now that it really matters, I'm not ready to go, right? And I tell you, full transparency, it took me some years to understand this concept because I am a extremely career-driven individual, right? So I care about what my seniors think of me and how they view me. So again, full transparency, it took me some years to grasp this, right? But once I figured out the concept and understood what truly matters, everything else will take care of itself, right? Because again, results don't lie, right? So I understand for some of the younger soldiers, it may be kind of difficult, right? But trust me, once you grasp it and once you fully understand it and once you create that environment for your subordinates to grow through failure, I guarantee you the results on the back end, they will speak for themselves.
Yeah. And I think you brought up something earlier about culture, right? Because we develop and we breed a winning culture. And, you know, kind of what you touched on was you need to be okay with not winning during training, not winning and failing, you know, while you know, working on your squad, working on your platoon, working on your company. You know, those times right there are probably the most influential in a young soldier's life to really grasp the concept, because there are future leaders. And, you know, if old Sarge is always just grinding them and making them do push-ups for not being perfect, right? They're going to be afraid to do anything that's outside the norms and really try and expand their knowledge base, because they're just going to go with always what they know. And, you know, like I know, right, through MET-TC, that every situation's different. You know,
absolutely.
You can do the exact same mission, but MET-TC always plays a factor in how it's going to be executed. And if people aren't experiencing or going through different experiences and trying different things or thinking, quote unquote, outside the box, right, of what could potentially go wrong, you know, because Murphy is a B, right? So Mother Nature has a factor, you know, the terrain has a factor, you know, all these things. And if you're always in the motor pool and you're never changing up the scenario, like, what are you really doing? What are you really getting after? And that's development for those younger guys and gals, right? I say that loosely, but for those younger leaders coming up, because that's what they're going to, you know, transfer to their leadership, you know. And you already said, like, you learned a lot from good leaders, but what do you learn from those bad leaders? What do you take away from that, you know, in this type of environment, in this situation? What do you think?
Absolutely. So, you know, I believe, you know, you always hear younger leaders or younger soldiers saying, you know, I didn't learn anything from that leader because that was a bad leader, or so on and so forth. So first, I'd like to debunk that. I believe that's false, right? I believe you learn something from everybody, right? In some cases, you may absolutely learn what to do, but you also may learn what not to do, right? And it's false to say that you can't learn something good from a bad leader, because you can, right? But you know, just to answer your question, what have I learned from some of those leaders that, you know, wasn't so optimal for the situation? And I'll tell you, I think I sum it up to this in reference to this subject, right? It is creating that high stress, that, I don't want to say toxic, but that stressful, you know, organization that did not enable leaders to grow. And I kind of give you an example, right? There has been some units, right, to where some of the leaders, including myself, were so mission focused and were so focused on ensuring that the mission was completed, right, that in many cases, the moment they saw a subordinate soldier deviating from the actual requirement or what they believed was the right way to accomplish the task, they would just take over it and then they would do it, right? What did that create? To me, I believe that created an organization that was not a learning organization, and organization that did not develop young soldiers and subordinate soldiers. So to me, I think that's a toxic cycle, because what's going to happen when those leaders that are capable of accomplishing the task now PCS and leave, because this is always a revolving door within an organization. Now you're going to have a bunch of up-and-coming junior leaders that don't know what right looks like because they were never afforded the opportunity to learn, grow, and accomplish the task, right? Because the moment failure was even mentioned or observed, the leaders that knew how to do it the right way would jump in and just take over it. So again, I think just those leaders that, just create that environment, right, that is so stressful and so high strung to where they don't afford their subordinate leaders the opportunity to grow and fail, and in return allow their subordinate leaders to grow and fail.
Yeah, that crushes confidence and trust, right, with your subordinates.
Absolutely.
So without confidence, without trust, they're not going to be willing to step outside of the norms and go out there and be okay with failing, right? And they're going to, you're breeding, subordinate leaders that will learn to cut corners in order to get the go in training. So, I mean, and that goes back to the culture, right? So you said that, you learned a lot through trial and error, and you were fortunate to have leaders that believed in you, right, in order to let you fail, in order to let you grow. Can you share some of that experience?
Absolutely. So, I've been in a lot of, I would say great organizations, right? But I would contribute, I would say, one of my more influential organizations to an organization on Fort Sill. I'm not going to actually name it, right? But it was in a MLRS organization on Seal, right? And I'm going to be full transparent to kind of, explain the situation. So I went to this organization. I was straight off the trail. I was best trained drill sergeant, and I wanted to stay on Fort Sill. So I went over to the Fire Brigade, right? I was a young sergeant first class, and I would be, lying if I told you that I had it all together at that moment, right? Because I was still trying to figure out what it means to be a senior non-commissioned officer, right? And this is where I learned, growth through failure. This is where that seed was planted in me by my, mentor, I like to call. So I went there, right? Again, it was an organization. It was a very high-strung, organization. We were getting ready to go on a rotation to Korea, I believe. So the up tempo was pretty fast. We was getting ready to get out the door, right? And again, I cared so much about the success of the organization and what the leaders thought of me, that in many cases I was that leader that, hey, I see a soldier fell and this is not how I want it to be done. You know what? I can do it better. I'm going to get it done, right? And what did that create, right? That created what the means of not allowing my subordinate leaders and my subordinate soldiers to grow, right? So, again, I had a great command sergeant major, right? People pulled me in the office at least once a week, I would say. And he would be honest with me. He'd say, Baldwin, you're getting the mission done, right? Your stats are on point. Everything is good to go, right? You are crushing it. Your platoon is the best platoon in the battalion. But I got one question for you. I said, what's that, Sergeant Major? What's going to happen if you would have to go on leave for a week? There. What would happen with that platoon? Would that platoon still be able to function when you're not there? And you know what? And I looked at him and said, I don't think so, Sergeant Major. He told me right in my eyes, well, you are failing as a leader. Right?
Yeah, you're the
and that's what I
failure.
Needed. Yep. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's what I needed. I needed to hear that because at that moment there, he pulled me in, right? And he gave me some good coaching, right? And he talked to me about this piece right here, and he made me get an ADP 6-22, yep. Right? And I started reading up a little bit, right? And that's where this seed got planted, and that's where I got this from, right? So, again, I would contributed to that senior non-commissioned officer right there. They kind of wound me in because in my eyes, again, the Army is a results-driven organization. I was absolutely producing the results. So in my eyes, I thought I was successful. But I was failing as a senior non-commissioned officer because I was not creating an environment, right, that supported growth and learning.
Yeah, I commend that, CSM, because there's a lot of senior leaders that are out there that see that you're a Sergeant First Class. They don't know if you're a Sergeant First Class for one day or 20 years, right? They have no clue, right? You're a Sergeant First Class. You're a senior non-commissioned officer. There's not a whole lot of development that people want to provide because they think that you know it, right? And it's an assumption, and we all know what an assumption is, right? It's the key to everything messing up, right? That's an assumption, right?
Absolutely.
So, they assume that so the guidance is not there. And if he would have never said anything, you would have been that single point of failure, right? And
Absolutely.
your guys, you could have never left. I always say to people, like, how do you get your time back in the Army? Because there's only 24 hours in a day, right? And everybody in the military and most organizations, you only supervise about 3 people, right? 3 to 5 people most at any level. So, how do you get your time back? If Mike Baldwin's like, man, I'm struggling at home, but I got it together at work. Do you? Right? Like, how do you manage that, right? And time management's always been a problem. And that's why a lot of people take shortcuts too, is because they don't have the time. But nobody wants to play long game and develop subordinate leaders and because it's hard. It takes a lot of time up front, but you get your time back in the end.
Absolutely.
And people don't realize, like, if you just spend the time a couple of months up front and you start delegating things as what good leaders do, because that creates what? Trust. It creates confidence, right? And it lets your leaders go out there and start learning. And they're not afraid because they know Sergeant First Class Baldwin's got my back. Right? He's not gonna be upset with me because I tried something and we failed. He's gonna encourage me to keep being innovative, adaptive, and teaching my subordinates, new and great and wonderful things. And so I commend that CSM for being able to recognize, right, being involved and recognize that yes, you as an individual had your stuff together, but you as a team did not,
Absolutely.
So trial and error, we don't often. So a lot of times, especially for us, my MOS, a lot of people are stuck on staff, right? And they don't have the opportunity to go out and train particular MOS. So, I don't know how familiar you are with, guys that are, and I say guys loosely again, but that are stuck on staff. Like, how do they get after, the training aspect of what their MOS is? Say they're stuck in operations and they don't, and they're a chemical soldier or they're an 88 Mike, right? They're not out there on the line, pushing trucks and pushing troops. They're stuck in operations. Like, how do they maintain their proficiency?
Yeah, so I like to answer this question in 2 parts, right? Because this also is another one of my, subjects that is near and dear to me, right? So first off, and I'm gonna use the 88 Mikes as an example because I am an 88 Mike or 88 Zulu by trait. So first off, if you ever meet anybody that knows me, they will tell you that one of the first things I'm gonna say, right, is that the Army depends upon you to be more than just a truck driver, right? If you associate yourself with just being a truck driver, you're a felon, right? And that is up to me, and that is up to the senior leaders, right, that are entrusted, to coach and mentor you to ensure that we are, briefing that or, embedding that into your thought process, right? So I believe that there's always time for training and for betterment, right? And I think a lot of the times, we kind of make excuses, to kind of say, well, because I got this going on, I can't do this or so on and so forth. I think there's always a training opportunity, right? And again, to kind of go back to that battalion on Fort Sill, because the ending of the story was, once I've gotten that piece figured out, again, one of my most influential leaders or mentors saw something else in me. He said, you know what? I understand that you are a 88 Mike, right? But I have an opening for the Operations Sergeant Major, so I'm going to make you the Operations Sergeant Major in ES3, right? And again, that was another challenge that I had to learn and go through failure. And one of the things he tasked me with was ensuring that all of the various MOSs within the staff shops were proficient within, were proficient at not only basic soldier tasks, but also within their functional MOS skills. So how did I get that accomplished? I ensured that we create shifts, right? Because I think it's unrealistic to think we're going to pull everybody out of the shop at the same time and shut down all of the shops, which, let's be honest, are the brains of the entire organization to conduct training. But I also understand that, hey, if we're not proficient at our basic soldier tasks as well as our functional MOS tasks, the battalion won't function also. So there's a balance, right? So what I would do is I created shifts and so on and so forth, or I would reach out to other organizations throughout the installation, i.e. on Fort Sill, we had a truck company on Fort Sill. So for all of my 88 mics and all of my transporters, in the event that they were in the staff shop and they needed to conduct some training, I would reach out to that organization's leadership and I would task them with that, right, or have them piggyback off that piece, right? So again, I think it's key to have that balance. But also, I think it's key to not use, hey, because I'm in this situation, I can't train on these tasks, right? So again, I think it's just a balance. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's actually a great segue into our next, topic, which is, communicating, right? And being a networker, a communicator, somebody, what you just said, right? Reaching out to other organizations in order to get your people training and making them, stay relevant. So, they know what's going on in the 88 mic world, even though they're in operations doing staff, land and ammo or whatever. Right. So, constructive feedback, that's one of your things, that you were talking about, and given that critical feedback in order to develop. What are you trying to say with that?
Yeah, so again, so with this piece right here, I believe that this is absolutely the foundation of the bedrock of development, right, of leader development. But sadly, once again, we have a lot of leaders that are either incapable of, providing that feedback, probably because they really don't understand what should be going on, or they're not proficient at the task at hand, or they're just not educated enough to kind of make that correction, or they're just afraid, right? I see that a lot, right? So I believe in reference to constructive feedback that a trained leader, a leader that is proficient at whatever he or she is required to do, possesses more confidence and possesses the expertise to provide that constructive feedback to ensure that the development is present amongst their subordinates, right? But again, sadly, if they don't know, they don't know. And when they don't know, what do they tend to do? Kind of go back off in the corner and just let be, right? Which is the wrong answer, right? So again, I think one of the great things about the Army and about the United States Non-Commissioned Officer Corps, right, is that we, have an environment that thrives off of that candid feedback or that constructive feedback. So it is key, right? But I think the first step is to ensure that the individual that is providing that constructive feedback, that individual is educated and that individual truly understands what the task at hand is, right? Because what you don't want to do is to be spewing false information or information that isn't, valuable at that moment to that individual. So, constructive feedback is key, but also it is good to, hey, kind of like put me down to pick me up. I will provide an example. Hey, Baldwin, you did such and such, and it's jacked up. But I need you to fix this. But on the other hand, this and this and this component of what you did was on point. So don't change that piece. Just adjust this some. Here are some examples of what I've done through trial and error. Here are some different regulations that kind of touches on that subject. Read this, kind of think about this, and tell me what you think, and we'll come back and we'll try it again, right? Not just, hey, Baldwin, you jacked up. fix yourself. That's not telling me anything, right? So again, I think it's key, but also I think it's key to ensure that, the individual that is providing that feedback is an educated individual as well and know the true standards, right?
Yeah, super important to vet, your observer controllers, right? To be able to give you that good, candid feedback and being educated. And I remember us doing a field problem. We were doing a local CTC rotation in Hawaii, right? And, they brought in a master sergeant to evaluate me who had never been a first sergeant. And, he's trying to give me subjective feedback, right? For one, he didn't even have anything written down. He was just trying to go from from the cuff. And I'm like, who are you? You're like, what are you talking about? Right? Like, he had no clue what he was talking about. And I totally just negated everything he said, and I just embarrassed him in front of everybody because he was talking senseless, right? He didn't have constructive feedback. He was like, well, I would have did this, I would have did that. I'm like, where's your experience coming from? What are you talking about, right? Where's your T&EOs? What documents do you have? Where's your checklist? Army has checklists for processes and how we conduct business. So I don't need your subjectiveness. I don't need you to tell me what you think you would have done in this situation. I need you to tell me what I did right, what I did wrong, and how to fix it, right? So if you don't have those three, right? You know how we do AARs, three sustains, 3 needs improvements, and three ups, 3 downs, right? And we'll go from there. Like, it was none of that. It was like, oh, I think you could have did this better, or you should have done this. I would have did that. I don't care what you would have done, right? And then it becomes confrontational, and you try to remain professional, but I don't like subjectiveness when it comes to, communicating back to me what I did or did not do right.
Exactly.
And he wasn't credible, in my opinion anyways, right? But, they were just like, oh, you're an E8, go out there and validate an E8. But when I talk to him, I'm asking what his experience is before we even start. So I know he has none. So he can't really give me feedback, because he's never been in my shoes. So and this was my second time being a first sergeant. You know what I mean? Like, this wasn't even my first go around. And this is like the end of my tenure. So I'm like 48 months in, and he's trying to tell me what he would have done, and he ain't never done it. He was actually getting ready. He was getting ready to go and be it, and go and do it. So you're right. They need to be credible. It needs to be legit information. And honestly, I don't really think it should be subjective. I think it needs to be objective based off what the criteria is.
Exactly.
And if you don't have the experience, then you shouldn't be that person.
Exactly.
So, communication, super vital. And ensuring development happen that we call it here, at Fort Bragg, flattening communication, right? We flatten communication where everybody's, on the same page, and anybody can tell anybody anything, if it's going to help the team. So we don't care about rank, and I think a lot of people are offended because some private's telling some sergeant what the better process is,
Exactly.
That shuts down a lot of growth and a lot of trust, and they will not go out on the limb they're afraid to fail because they can't give, their NCO or their platoon leader, platoon sergeant feedback.
Exactly. And then also, just to add, to your statement, I think it also combats unit buy-in, right? Buy-in, right? And unit commitment, right? So when I was a first sergeant, one of the things I was absolutely about was feedback from everybody, right? I used to tell all of my soldiers, I don't care what your rank is, I don't care who you are. If there's a better way to do something and you send it up the chain and it's being stopped before it gets to me, come see me, right? Because I think it's key for every member of an organization to know that their feedback is valuable, but also that, hey, if their way of doing something is better, it then becomes our way of doing it, and that's what we're going to go with, right? Because ultimately, what do every leader of an organization want, right? It goes back to those compliance versus commitment, right? We want committed soldiers, right? How do we get those committed soldiers? Those soldiers knowing that their feedback, that their input, that they are a part of the team, that they are part of the solution, right? And if you have a soldier, that's trying to provide that feedback, trying to provide that guidance, and you're shooting it down, I believe that you are absolutely preventing that soldier from growing and preventing that soldier from becoming the leader that he or she is capable of becoming, right? So I absolutely agree, and I think that is key for every personnel with an organization to know that their feedback and their input is valued, because again, it creates that commitment and that buy-in of that organization.
Yeah, that's facts, because we fight and we use mission command nowadays.
Absolutely.
We understand what the last order was, and then we're out there alone and afraid. We don't do command and control anymore, to where it's, hey, do it my way, and that's the only way. So if we want to utilize mission command in its full effect, right, everybody has to be a part of the plan.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy to me that we teach the MDMP process so late in the game. To me, that should be like ALC. Staff sergeants should understand what MDMP is. The military decision making process, because most of us, we didn't get into unless we went to battle staff, or MLC, right? That's when you start hearing about, and you're already at E8. You're a master sergeant, first sergeant. Like, now all of a sudden, what, how to plan operations, and what the 8 steps are, and what the process is, and understanding what IPB or mission analysis, like, that needs to be communicated early. And if we're talking about communication, and we're talking about mission command, right, everybody needs to be a member. The things that I've seen, and I go all over the place, and I talk to all kinds of different units, because that's what sergeants major do, right? We don't have a real job, so we just kind of go out and see what everybody else is doing. We want to see that the lowest level understands how to plan. We don't know how to plan resource or execute training anymore, because for the last 20 years, it was contractors doing it. You had some civilian bringing some new equipment out, and you just fall in on their training, and they'll plan the range, they'll plan everything else, so now you got platoon sergeants and PLs who grew up in an environment that don't know how to plan resource or really execute, good training. So therefore, they're scared to go outside their left and right limits, because they don't self-develop, they don't get enough institutional development, or they're not good on the job. They're not involved on operational learning, right? So, understanding the 3 pillars of military education for us in the Army, I always talk to people about, they're always like, I always ask them, like, what's the hardest pillar of education? And they're like, oh, we don't get enough schools. I'm like, all right, well, what's the one training that's on you? Oh, that's self-developing. Right. Why is that the hardest type of training to do? Sergeant Major, because it's on us. You're right. Exactly. Because you don't want to go and do it. You don't want to pick up ADP. You don't want to pick up a TM. You don't want to pick up an FM. And then the senior leaders, don't want to say that, hey, yeah, I haven't read that either.
Exactly.
I Googled, or I went on the Facebook page and somebody gave me a class, and they're just spitting the slides. Like, they don't know what the slides mean. They're just like, oh, we're going to conduct this training, read that slide. All right, next slide, right? And there's no context, to the content. And because, a lot of our leaders right now, they get promoted super fast, and, they don't have the knowledge base that goes with it. And The Army stretches us pretty thin, right? And we have our primary MOS, and then we have 1,000 additional duties, that go with that. But I think, what we talked about earlier is knowing how to delegate, right? Being able to develop everybody and get everybody on the same level, understanding people's strengths, their weaknesses, right? And being able to play off those and utilize those, putting people in the proper position. So understanding talent management, right? And being able to communicate flatly across the board what everybody needs to do and being able to give that feedback, right? And where we're at right now and talking communication, that constructive criticism to develop. And,
exactly.
Like you brought this podcast something very powerful. And this is like the heart of what I see as an issue in formations, in young leaders, and some that are a little bit older, that aren't very humble. But, being able to fail is a must. Being able to be supported, and in trusting that, your subordinates will fail and communicating, like you said, it's okay to fail. We're in an environment right now where we need to see if things work. But to your point of them, when I say them, the leaders being educated to know what right looks like, to let somebody go out there and be wrong and giving that feedback and showing them through good leader development, the process and the right way, and actually writing an SOP, something that somebody can pull out of their cargo pocket and say, this is how our team does it. This is our checklist. And we have different scenarios, different situations. We're doing it from air. We're doing it from land. We're doing it from sea. We're doing it from day. We're doing it at night. We're doing it above ground, underground, right? So there's multiple scenarios for that one problem that people need to tackle. And it does take the team to succeed. And, like you and your CSM who saw that if you go down, the whole ship sinks.
Exactly.
So taking
exactly.
those leaders,
that was the problem.
Yeah, taking those leaders and letting them know, like, hey, you're not as hot as you think you are, right? And here's why. But you being humble enough to take that criticism, that's the other thing, right? People wear their emotions on their sleeves, and people's feelings get hurt. What can you say, right? Or what would be your advice to a leader of soldiers out there who's super emotional, right? Of getting criticism, who doesn't want to be criticized. Like, what do you say to somebody like that?
Great question, right? And I could sum this up pretty easy. Right? This is another one of my good sayings I like to say, right? So I believe as a leader, number one, you must understand that the Army is a growing organization. The Army, as an organization as a whole, grows and learns its lessons through past events, i.e. either success or failures, right? I think that's pretty cut and dry. And I would tell you, if you are a leader and you wear your heart on your shoulders and you think you got it all together and you know everything, right? I think you need to take a step back and look at yourself, because the Army requires you to be a lifelong learner, right? Again, that is all throughout ADP 6-22, right? And the moment you say, hey, I got it all, I don't need to know anything else, I don't need any constructive feedback or any growth, I think that's the moment that you are no longer good for the organization as a whole. So if you're one of those leaders, please, just take this, and kind of let it marinate and just think about it, right? But the Army, the team is on you to learn. That's the reason why we have all these different, PMEs and NCO schools at various levels, right? Because it requires of us to continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to evolve. And if you think you got it all, I think you need to take a good look in the mirror, because you aren't any good to yourself, let alone your soldiers and your organization that you're serving upon.
So I think that's a great segue to this last bit I want to close with you. And you said that the day that you or anyone around you stops inspiring to grow, that you're no longer valuable to your organization.
Absolutely.
That's pretty powerful. The day that you stop growing is the day that you're no longer valuable to your organization. What do you mean by that? Let's close with that.
Yeah, so again, great segue. So, our ultimate goal, right? Our ultimate mission, right, is to defend the American people and fight and win the nation's wars, right? To sum it all up, right? And that consists of us going into various operational environments. And I would tell you that the operational environments that we are tasked to go and fight in are ever changing. All right, they are challenging and they are dynamic, meaning they are constantly changing, right? Which requires us to always growing and always learning new tactics and just always learning new ways to do things, right? If we as an Army, if we as leaders go into tomorrow's battle with the same mindset, with the same tactics, with the same everything that we did when we first invaded Iraq or Afghanistan, I think we're already a step behind, right? To me, that's one example. Another example is just the recruits that we're bringing in now, our younger troops, our younger soldiers, Just like I said today when we first started, right? We have to evolve. We have to evolve with times, right? We have to ensure that we are remaining relevant and that we are continuing to share the Army's message or get the Army's message out to as most people as possible, right? What are those means right now? I.e., Facebook, Twitter, podcasts, so on and so forth. When I first joined, or when you first joined, it was pen and paper and formations, right? Times are changing, right? So we have to constantly be willing to evolve and change, right? Now, sadly, we have some leaders that may think they know it all, that may think they don't need to change, that may think the same thing that they learned when they went through DLC 20 years ago, or back then it probably was PLDC 20 years ago, that is fine and dandy to operate right now in this current operation environment, and that isn't the case, right? And you aren't doing yourself any justice, let alone this organization that we call the Army. So I think it is key to have that lifelong learning mindset so that you can ensure that you are remaining relevant and that you are projecting the proper information to your subordinates, right? Don't just repeat something that you were taught 15 years ago because you were taught it 15 years ago. I guarantee you, if you get into that rig that it came from that time ago, either that regulation probably no longer exists or that regulation has transformed and has evolved to, kind of be in line with today's times, right? Or today's operation environment. So that's kind of my spiel on it. Again, I think it's key, and I think our soldiers depend upon us to ensure that we remain relevant and that we are educated on the most current information.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Hear, hear. I look at it as a practice, like a doctor, right? Because new revolutionary, things happen, and things are innovative, and like a lot of stuff we're relying on now is, AI type things. And, if people still, the dinosaur leaders that are out there that still don't know how to work a smartphone and refuse, right? These are the people that got to get gone. You're the ones that got to retire. And you're absolutely correct, because the battlefield changes, our enemies change, the way that the wars are fought in the future has definitely changed. We can see that what's going on in Europe right now, and we're taking a lot of lessons learned from that. So you are 100% in my book correct in those statements. And I definitely, I love following you. I've been following you your whole career, since you were private. I can't wait to see you pin Sergeant Major. You're going to be phenomenal. I know a lot of people got your back, which is great. That's a testament to you. Stay humble, stay hungry, You know, the best is yet to come for you and your family. You guys will remain blessed. I guarantee it. And I look forward to what you do in the future. And I appreciate you coming on the show and spending some time with us, you know, in your busy schedule over there at the Academy. And you know, I look forward to the future and what you're going to do out there to the force.
Thank you. I truly appreciate it. And as I previously stated, you know, you were one of those influential leaders that I saw at a very young age. You know, I was a little knucklehead back then, but I looked up to you. You know, you knew it. And again, I really appreciate it. Right. And again, I appreciate on this platform because, again, I think, you know, this is one of the ways of the future. And this is one of the ways to ensure that we're getting the Army's message out to a multitude of individuals. So, again, I really appreciate it, brother.
All right, good people. You're on the mic with me, JD.